So please keep in mind, don't put us on hold, things like that, background noise, keep yourself muted. But our presenter today is glad to take questions. So we will be monitoring the chat for questions, and feel free raising your hand, get our attention if you'd like. As I said, closed caption is on. Our host for today is the Project Management Community Group Co-Chairs and Steering Committee. My name is Lisa Bellows, and I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm from Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. And today's agenda is on reporting your PMP PDUs and just kind of managing your PMP with the Project Management Institute. A few reminders before we get started. I know we've been doing a really great job at this, but as you use our Connect platform, posting discussion topics, please be sure to include hashtags in them. It's a great tool. Or if you're going out and searching for things in our Connect community, you can find things like Agile or job opportunities, monthly meetings, things like that. Okay. A few reminders of upcoming events. There's been a lot of chatter on the discussion list about project management tools. So we heard you, and I believe Fred is going to be coordinating a session for our September meeting on project management tools, specifically Smartsheet and Team Dynamics. In October, we'll be at our annual conference in Denver. So keep watch. We'll be getting details of when all the sessions are, both the in-person conference as well as the virtual Educause annual conference. Okay. November, we're working on a panel discussion with the ITSM Connect group. And then in December, since it's kind of December 21st, we'll probably be taking a no meeting break. I also wanted to point out that we recently had on August 9th, a group of folks met on Agile project management. There was a lunch and learn, and we're hoping to soon add that to the library in our Connect area. So keep a watch for that if you're interested. And with that, I will turn it over to Carol, who will introduce today's presenter.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. So once again, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to have Glen Farrow here from PMI. Glen is a certification specialist for PMI, and he's going to share with us, if you are a PMP, how to report your PDUs. Glen is also graciously going to answer any of the questions you have about getting a PMP or anything random out there that you're thinking of that possibly PMI can help you with. So Glen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you again for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody. And again, we are open to any questions that you may have. I'm bringing up my presentation now. Just get this going. There. Okay. I get a little about myself. I have been with PMI almost 15 years. For the first 9, 10 of those, I was in integrated services, which is their shared service group. My team was a second tier level group that handled customer service questions and questions that surrounded certification applications, membership, payments, PDUs, audits, REPs, which have now become ATPs. My team did a little bit of everything, which made it a wonderful thing to get up every morning and go to work because you never knew what you were going to be working on that day. I had an opportunity in late 2019 to join the certification team, which I worked with on a regular basis. I jumped at the opportunity. They are an awesome team. In my mind, they're the best team in PMI, and I am so glad that I was able to join them. But I wanted to share with you some things today about our offerings at PMI, and more specifically, how to maintain your PDUs and your certification. So one of the things that we offered during the pandemic was this certification framework. We decided that we needed to have a way of visually providing all of the certifications and the micro-credentials that are available from PMI. If a person comes to PMI.org and says, I've got X amount of experience, I really want to get into project management, or maybe you are that accidental project manager who has been given projects to do and to oversee and want to know a little more, we provide this framework for you to see exactly what we offer, the ways that you can be recognized for your knowledge and your experience. And this form here is continuing to go through iterations. It will become interactive. It will be interactive with other offerings that we have. Many of our learning assets will also be tied into this, but you get a good idea of the things that we are offering at PMI. So those of you who have taken the PMP exam post January 2nd of 2021 took what was considered at that time the new exam. The exam that changed on this date was the largest, most extensive change to the PMP exam that PMI has ever had. There was some trepidation in the space about the amount of changes that were happening. The 2021 release was actually delayed twice. It was to be released in early 2020, but because of the pandemic, we realized that it was not the best time to release a new certification. Many people had studied for the prior one. There were, as you all know, there were limited opportunities to study for the new one. So we decided to launch it in 2021. The really big changes were the changing of the domains from the project lifecycle to these three domains that you see here: people, process, and business environment. Also, to another huge change was the questions now are 50% predictive or waterfall and 50% agile and hybrid, which had not been the case in the past. So they were two very big changes that the market did not know how to prepare for at times. Also too, and we could talk a little bit more about this as we go, but the exam is based on the exam content outline. As a matter of fact, all exams at PMI are based on the exam content outline. Even the CAPM, which really is a book knowledge exam, is based on the ECO that is developed, and the CAPM is changing later this year. It is taking in some more tasks that hadn't been on there before. And we want to make sure that people understand that it is not solely based on any edition of the PMBOK guide. The PMBOK guide is an excellent resource and reference for everybody who is in the project management space, who is handling projects or involved in projects, but the exam is not based exclusively on the knowledge that you would receive by reading and studying only the PMBOK guide. Also, too, we knew we had gotten it right with these 3 domains because we had worked with many, many different stakeholders within the project management space. We spoke with current experts, people who have the PMP, people who head up PMOs, those hiring managers. So we looked at many different sides of what does a project manager need to know and do on a daily basis. And also remember, the PMP is an experiential certification. It is really the only experiential certification in the marketplace. So you must have a minimum of 36 months leading and directing projects to sit for the exam. That is normally not the case with other project management certifications. You sit through a class for maybe 4 days, and the 5th day you take an exam. It's more recall than anything. To pass the PMP exam, you have to have that 36-month knowledge so that you understand the scenarios that are being presented to you. If you just read the book, you would not understand the nuances of the questions and the scenarios that you're presented. So when you're preparing for the exam, review the exam content outline. There is also a list called a reference list. It is the top 10 resources that are cited when writing, developing, and validating the questions. The top 10 that are picked for that. Every question must have a minimum of 2 sources that back up that knowledge. That ensures that it is not an outlier, that it may be only seen in maybe one geographic area or in one industry. We make sure we avoid that by ensuring that it's validated by at least 2 resources. And also, you'll want to read the handbook. The handbook tells you the processes and protocols you'll go through to apply, submit payment if you are selected for audit, how to handle that, and then how to go ahead and schedule and sit for your exam. So these are just some URLs of information that you can find within PMI.org that will help you and guide you through the different processes. So getting down to the meat of the situation, if you will, of maintaining your PMP or any certification, and even if you have a CAPM now, that also is not just an exam every 5 years. You can submit 15 PDUs and renew your CAPM now. Earlier this year, the talent triangle went through an evolution, looking at what is happening in the project management space. So some of the wording has changed. Technical project management now becomes ways of working. And what is different and what is encompassed with that is the idea that you are maybe currently using some hybrid, some agile methods. There may be some out there that haven't even been developed yet that can fit nicely into the ways of working. So it is really for the growth of the different applications or approaches that a project manager can take. Leadership then becomes power skills. So those skills that you need to navigate through human interaction, working with people, communication, those things that you need to be successful in, that is a power skill that will assist you to be successful as a project manager. And then the third is the business acumen to understand how your project supports the company's strategy, the initiatives, making sure the value that you are delivering through your projects continues to meet the expectations of the project on which you're working. Any questions so far?
Glenn, we do have one. It's kind of off topic. The question is how to become an authorized training partner to offer PMI certifications for college students. I don't know if you want to address that now or if you'd like to wait to the end.
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot to say about that. If you would, if you go online to pmi.org, there is a link that provides you the information you need about how to become an ATP, the things that you need to submit, the paperwork that needs to be there. It is all online. You submit it, there's a review of your application, of the information you sent, and that is the best way to do that moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. And that link is already in the chat. Whoever put that question in the chat, do you want to do a follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thanks, Glenn.
Sure. So just a reminder of how to maintain your credential. You will see a version of this within the PDU CCR handbook. There is a handbook just about renewing applications, renewing certifications. The 60 PDUs that are required for the credentials on the left-hand side, the 30 PDUs for those center ones, and then the 15 for the CAPM. It really is, and we're going to talk a little bit more through the presentation about this. It is very easy to submit those, especially when you go online, and you'll see later each activity that is in the directory, the CCR directory, will have the PDUs laid out by the town triangle label, so you know exactly how many you're getting and how many you need. So to submit activities for PDUs, the best way of doing it, and I'm not calling anybody out on this, but the best way of doing it is submitting it at the time you take the course, because it's it helps when your memory's fresh. If you do take it through an ATP, that PDU will immediately be approved and it will not be audited. It goes through very quickly and you have those PDUs. If there is something that you do that may be outside of the realm of an ATP offering, it may be audited. There is a certain amount that are randomly audited, and just to ensure that we maintain the credential and maintain our ANSI certification. We are ANSI certified for the development, validation, and renewal of certifications. So it's important that we do ask questions when trust but verify. So to maintain your certifications, you would need to go onto your My PMI dashboard. When you do that, when you sign into PMI.org, you will see screen here, visit CCRS. And you can search for the courses through, if you have the title, even if you have some words of the title, maybe not memorize all of it, or by the provider. If you know who the provider is, you can bring it up in that manner. So the course catalog, you put in, I just put in Agile. I'm like, okay, I took something, or maybe I want to take something. My team is now starting to move to a more agile environment, and I want to take some courses to help me learn more about that. So I go out to the dashboard, I put in Agile, and here's the first one that comes up. You had me in Agile, an open space event for learning of Agile. So you can see here that this is a 2-hour course. Each PDU is 1 hour of directed learning or activity. As you can see, these the headings there are the old headings. We have made it, the changes to the talent triangle is really an event that will go through on the remainder of the year. We are changing as we go on many of them. You will know that you know how to translate the technical, the leadership, and the strategic. So you'll know where they go and you'll know what you need. So for this one, I pulled this up. This is the one I'm thinking about. So I go into my dashboard. And then I can go down to my PMP. I am in good standing. So if I want to report PDUs, I just click on report PDUs. And here is a breakdown of the different types of PDUs that you can include. The top one there on the left, PDU claim code, that's something that chapter provided. It does say REP, but an ATP provided. Again, that goes through without any problems at all. If you took a course that isn't from ATP or from PMI, you would put it under course or training. Maybe some organizational meetings that offer PDUs, maybe another group that talks about project management, dinner meeting, and then they talk about project management, you can include that. Online or digital media that you've reviewed or written. And then, did you read a book? You know, maybe you decided I really have to buckle down and understand what Kanban is. So you get the book and you read it, and you can include that in the number of hours that it took for you to read that book. You will get PDUs for that. And then any type of informal learning that you may have, you know, maybe there's a group such as yourself where it's a project manager group, and maybe you have a guided discussion for an hour about certain topics or things that are problematic in regards to the approach and you finding ways of fixing it. You can include those as PDUs. And the other portion of that is giving back. You do receive PDUs just for working as a practitioner in the project management space. You know, you put in the number of months you worked, and it will calculate the ratio of what you should receive. You can get up to 8, I believe, during the 3-year period. So that's you know, you're doing it anyway on your day-to-day job. It's good to receive credit for that. If you create content, maybe you're writing an article for a trade journal or even for PMI, give a presentation at one of PMI's events or one of your own events that is strictly project management. You can include that. Again, 1 hour is 1 PDU. Do you?
Glenn?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. For these meetings, for the Educause project management community group meetings, these count as hours. Is that correct?
They should.
And if someone in our membership does a presentation during these meetings, the time that it takes to prepare the presentation, that counts as well, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Very good points. Yes. Yes, so that's sharing knowledge. And then volunteering. Did you volunteer your project management skills to have an event? You know, maybe, you know, it could a number of different events that you could work on. And it doesn't have to be it does not need to be about project management. You just brought that application, that approach, that knowledge, that methodology to the event. So when you're submitting, put in the provider name or the provider ID number. The ATPs and the REPs have a 4-digit number. You enter that, enter the course number or name. There's a description that you can fill in here. Date you started, date you completed, the URL. Maybe there is something online that is an invitation to the event that you want to show. The contact person, again, they're optional. Contact phone. More than likely, we are not calling. That is not something that PMI needs to do on a regular basis. So if that URL is there and there's a question, we can get all the information we need right online. And you can see that once you make the claim, it will, so with the Agile course, I would get PDUs both for the PMP and for my ACP. One course can, if you have 3, 4, 5 different PMI certifications, they apply to all of them as long as it is the information, the knowledge, the concepts that were part of that course touches on the credential you have, it can be included in that. I agree this claim is accurate, hit submit. And then they are applied. You can go back to the screen we saw earlier with, it showed the numbers that you had of the 60 that you needed, say, for PMB. So then you can go, oh, I need 15 more. What should I take? When should I take them? They're online, they're asynchronous. There's some that are offered on demand. So that is the best way of obtaining the PDUs is through the CCR directory. However, there are many, many other opportunities to gather them if you need to. Listen to a podcast for an hour on a ride to work or on a trip. There's an hour. There's one PDU. Any questions so far? Okay.
I don't see any. If anyone would like to unmute and ask, the floor is yours. Hearing nothing, go ahead and
Okay.
continue, Glenn.
Okay, so many of you have the PMP already. So maybe the question should be, why should I maintain the PMP? Okay, so top 5 reasons. My apologies to David Letterman, but the top 5 reasons to maintain your PMP: you distinguish yourself among your peers. You earn and maintain the gold standard in project management certifications. That is a terminology that we do not throw around lightly. It is the gold standard. It is a certification that was developed by project managers for project managers. It is unique in that way. And it is something that, again, every year we go through an ANSI audit, we go through an ISO audit to ensure that our systems that we use to develop and maintain these credentials meet the standards for a gold standard, well-producing certification. One thing to note, PMI does offer micro-credentials. You may hear those used interchangeably. They really are not interchangeable. A micro-credential does not have to be renewed. Once you earn it, you've earned it for good. There are no PDUs. It's usually, the test is usually fewer questions. The tests can be taken online, but unproctored. So it's a little different way of obtaining it. but you do not need to maintain a micro-credential. So number 4, obtaining the PMP credential displays your ability to work productively, in any project management approach. Questions about agile and hybrid could have many, many different facets to them, different approaches that in agile that not everyone uses. So it shows that you have a knowledge around those and that you could be someone who can drive value for your organization, regardless of the approach. Number 3, you will hold a credential that's been developed by project professionals for project professionals. Just this year, we have started meeting again face-to-face. The last time that we met face-to-face to do this, we call them mega item writing sessions that include both the item writing, the question writing, and validation, not by the same people. But last time we did that, we did it in February of 2020 in Ghana. That was the last travel. I did have the great joy of going there because it was very interesting. I would never have made it to the continent of Africa if my company did not send me there. But it was a wonderful trip. They were fantastic. It was fantastic being able to go. And the reason why I'm saying this is if you have the PMP and you want to get involved, we have an opportunity for people to help. We are always looking for volunteers to help write questions, validate questions. We have trips coming up to Lisbon, the Prague, Bangkok. We go to different regions so that we are taking into account the project manager who resides maybe in that region, their view and their standpoint of how their approaches are done. So if you are interested, please feel free to reach out to me. We do still have them in the US. Our next trip is in Scottsdale in September. And we will have more in the US if you don't want to go internationally, but there are plenty of opportunities. So I encourage you, if you'd like to get involved, please reach out to me. And if you have a different certification with us and you'd like to help with that, we have those also. ACP, PBA, PGMP, PFMP, they're all there, and we do need volunteers for all of them. Globally, on average, this last survey, PMI does a somewhat of a semi-annual salary survey. Those who hold the PMP credential earn 16% more than their colleagues who do not hold the credential. Globally, in the United States, it's 32%. It is a significant difference, significant. And the number one reason, do it for yourself. Maintain it for yourself. You've worked hard to obtain it. You've worked hard to maintain it. Show others what you've done and how you can add value by being that PMP. Opportunities to mentor, be a part of a chapter. It's all something that, one of the things that, again, that makes PMI stand out in regards to our credentials and our organization is the 10,000 volunteers that we have. We have a very, very enthusiastic group of volunteers who want to help, who want to get involved, who, some become evangelists for project management, and they want to show what great things can be done. And if you are like that and you want to get involved, please do. We can use your time and your talent. So I appreciate the time to share this with you. I am available at glen.farrow@pmi.org. I am happy to take questions at any time. I will, if I get a question one day, I should be able to get back to you within 48 hours. I wish it could be sooner, but sometimes I am inundated with questions and I don't want to send you something that's not well thought out. Any questions about my presentation? Anything that?
If anyone would like to unmute and ask a question, now's the time, or again, you can drop it in the chat. But Glenn, I just want to say thank you for the presentation first. And I am so glad that I took the PMI or PMP exam when I did. I got my PMP in 2013, and it sounds like it's changed quite a bit since then. So I will be sure to put in my PDUs so I don't have to take that exam again. Right. So I don't, as long as I continue to renew,
Right.
I don't have to do that.
You don't
Right.
have to do that. Yes. Just as a reminder, I know everybody reads everything they're given to them. I mean, everybody has so much free time. They're reading all the handbooks and everything. So you have 3 years to renew your certification. Any of the certifications, it's 3 years. After 3 years, you go into a suspended status. At that time, if you're suspended, you are not to use the PMP logo. You're not able to call yourself a PMP, but you still have time to submit PDUs. After 4 years, after that 4th year, you are expired and you will need to sit and take the test again. So I just want to clarify that if there's any questions about that. After that 4th year, 4 years plus 1 day, you need to sit for the exam again.
Got it. And would anyone like to unmute and ask a question?
Oh, there's a hand. Jennifer.
Go right ahead.
All right. Let me see if I can put my hand back down. There we go. You started off the presentation with the chart that shows the certifications, and it kind of has this, vertical of early on to more senior progressive. And I wonder if it's all perspectives, right? But when you look at that chart, in some ways, I could see how someone might infer from that the PMP is kind of lower on that scale of seniority. And does that maybe influence folks to taking the PMP less seriously?
So I hear what you're saying. We have not found that since we rolled out. The feedback that we've received, and we've done, I don't want to say extensive feedback, but we have solicited feedback. That's not the feedback we're receiving. We wanted to show, so part of the idea about the certification framework is there may be people coming to PMI.org that have never, ever gone to that website before. And the idea is, okay, I'm here now. What is there for me from your organization? What can you give me? What can you offer me? Where can I go? If you're someone who is deeply involved already, you know what's out there, but I may only have 2 years in. Maybe I'm newly out of school. I have 2 years as a leading and directing projects. I now know that I can't sit for that exam yet because I need at least 3 years. But if you go into each one of those, so each one of those opens up and gives you what you need, what the test is like, so you can explore where you should go. And we're also going to go to the point where you can customize your journey, if you will. So it's going to be able to say, I've got the PMP, but I really would like to do this. And you can start stacking and bundling and guiding your own career based on the journey you want to have.
So Glenn, can you speak to the steps to get a PMP? There are several people in our group that are like you referred to accidental project managers.
Yeah.
And there's some of us in the group that, are aspiring PMPs. Can you just real quickly go through those logical steps that one would need to take?
You mean to apply for? And
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
great. So you do need to be registered on PMI.org. Once you are, you will be able to access what is called My PMI Dashboard. All the information, all the different places you go on PMI.org will be available to you through the dashboard. So maybe you start Career Navigator and you say, Career Navigator presents you with questions, and it tells you based on the things that you prefer, maybe this is where you should go, or maybe these are classes you should take to make your, to help you move along. So there's Career Navigator. There's also something called Kickoff, which you can take, and it's a short questionnaire. It asks you scenarios to show you waterfall and agile. So what questions they ask you, which way you go. It would say, well, you're now working in a waterfall or predictive project. That's because of the questions you answer. So once you're into My PMI Dashboard, if you go up to the top banner, it's going to have certifications, membership. You hit on certifications, then PMP. It will give you a button to select that says apply for the PMP. You go in the PMP recent. Well, I say recently because I keep forgetting I haven't been in the building for 2 years. Sorry. We about 3 years ago, we changed the application from 32 pages to 4 because it was overwhelming. It was an overwhelming process to fill out 32 pages of information. It made it to the point where people were dissuaded. It was a demotivator to take it. So you go in, now the 4 pages are, what was your education? Do you have a college degree? What's your highest level of education? If you do not have a bachelor's or higher degree, if you have what is called a secondary, associate's, or global equivalent, you will need 72 months of project management experience. And once you select that, the screens that you will get will show you that is the experience that you need. So you will need to keep putting in your experience. But after you list where you received your master's, the next screen is going to ask you for with whom did you attend and when did you attend your formal project management education. So you need 35 what we call contact hours. So 35 contact hours, where did you take it? You put that in, and then it just asks for your experience. When you've reached those 36 months, it used to be hours, now it's months, 36 months. Once you reach the 36 months, it says you're good. You click through, you attest that you will follow certain ethics. You hit submit. Usually you will hear something within 5 calendar days. Either your application will be accepted and it will request payment as the next step, or you are randomly selected for audit and you will need to submit documents. Well, when I say documents for audit, the audit is now digital. You don't have to mail things in like you had to before. Now someone you just upload the documents right into the system. There's no mailing there. The person who's verifying doesn't have to get a form and then mail it back to you, and you write on the back of the envelope, and no, none of that anymore. And once we get everything back from that, usually decisions made in 1 to 3 calendar days. So it's a quick turnaround time. You can go in, and if you're going to take the exam, so there's a couple ways of taking the exam. There is through a Pearson VUE test center. Pearson VUE is our exam delivery partner in the US and pretty much the entire world, with some, there are some countries that have another provider. You can go to their facility when they have an open date and time that is preferable to you, and you can sit and take the exam there, or you can take it via online proctored. Online proctored exams are available every 15 minutes for the entire day. So if you want to take it at 0:15, it's available, and you can set it up and take it from home, from work. We ask that you not take it from a public spot, because if it's public and someone walks behind you, that exam's going to be terminated. You need to be somewhere that is quiet, where you are not going to be disturbed. So there is, but you can set it up any 15-minute increments during the day for 24 hours, whatever is good for you. So there's two different ways of taking it. If you set it up and then need to cancel or reschedule, as long as you do it within the right amount of time, you will not be penalized. If you do it within 30 days of there is a $70 fee for rescheduling. So and then if you do it within 48 hours of your exam, you cannot do it, and you will forfeit your money. So we ask that. Now, if there is a serious situation, you get sick, you know, God forbid, someone's in an accident and you can't make it, as soon as you can, contact PMI to submit what we call an ECF, extenuating circumstance form, and then we will work with you to get you rescheduled without a financial penalty. You know, things happen. We know that people live lives. So we just, so just get a hold of us when you can, and we will work with you and get it switched to a time that, or maybe, if, again, God forbid, you have a long rehabilitation period, we can shut your application down, refund your money to you, and you can reapply when you're ready. Like, there's other things you can do. You're not stuck.
That's great information.
Oh, I see the chat going on here. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And Ed has a question for you.
Okay.
Perfect. So I've noticed the further down you go, the certification path, you get to the PGMP and the PFMP, there are less and less, if none, courses, if my grammar's right there, none courses to help you consolidate and get that information for the certifications. Does PMI have any plans to seek vendors out that provide that type of instruction for those other certifications?
Yes, definitely. Probably first will come through the ATPs first before it's out in the general market. But yes, definitely. And that's a good point that you make. Thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, it will come through the ATPs first.
All right, perfect. So is there any plan or any timelines for that, or should we just keep checking the stock?
I'm sorry. I wish I am not privy to all those conversations. So I don't have exact dates and times that when that, quarters when that's going to come out, but I know that it's being reviewed, because it is a common, you're bringing up a common observation that, hey, I want to take these and I need the knowledge. Where's my, so you don't need contact hours for the PGMP or PFMP, where you do for the PMP. You don't need that. So those courses aren't as prevalent because there isn't a genuine demand for them on a regular basis as there is for the PMP.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. We're getting close to the top of the hour. Does anyone have any other questions for Glenn?
I noticed the chat. Let me just say first, I'm sorry. I noticed the chat. Yes. If you are going to take it via OPT, online proctored, you need to go to the Pearson VUE website and run the system test. Run it as soon as you're ready to schedule. So if you're approved tomorrow, I would run it in the next week. And you run it on the system, the device on which you're going to take the exam, because especially if it's a business laptop, one that there are things running in the background that will preclude you from downloading what is called OnView, and you will not be able to sit for the exam if they can't make that connection. So make sure you do that so you know what is running out there that you have to turn off prior to sitting for the exam.
The downside is that the app that we have does not run constantly. It's one of those that it kind of spontaneously kicks off. So you run those pre-tests and it doesn't always catch it. So, if you're not sure, check with your IT and see if there are anything like that on there. And if there is, maybe make plans for a backup.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can they shut it down for a while?
They can if you know in advance, except
Yeah.
you don't know when it's going to go off. And so when they disconnect you from the test. There's no calling them back
Right.
up and saying,
Yeah,
hey,
they
I'm
don't.
sorry, something went up. It's like, nope, sorry. Try
Yeah.
again, Charlie.
Yeah.
Mm.
Understand that when we moved in April of 2020, when we moved the PMP to online proctor, there are bad actors out there. Okay. And the bad actors spend a lot of time figuring out how to get our content. So, we have to be careful about it in our intellectual property, because if they just spent their time working as a project manager doing good for the world, we'd have a much better world, but they don't.
Well, and you don't want somebody cheating on their exam either.
No,
So, you
no.
don't want
We don't.
people
Yeah.
sending them chat messages. Hey, here's the answer.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Glenn. So Lisa, let me turn it back over to you.
Sorry, lost my mute button there. Thanks. So just as a reminder, the next meeting is September 20th, and the plan for that meeting is to talk about project management tools, Smartsheet versus team dynamics, I think is the plan right now, as we mentioned. As a reminder, we are constantly updating our Educause Connect site. It is new within the last year or so, so we're continuing to promote it. If you saw my post in the chat, if you have an idea for a session that you'd like to see us do at one of these monthly meetings, or if you'd be interested in presenting a topic at one of these meetings, of course, you'd get PDUs for both. So you want to go out there, there is an intake form, and I actually just added it to the front page of the Connect site. So if you missed that link in the chat, it's now linked right at the top of the Connect page in the intro text. Thank you again for coming, and we hope you enjoy this. The recording will be posted to our website probably within the next week. Thank you.
Also, thank you
Thank you.
again for inviting me. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely, Glenn. We might even have you back.
I'm sure you can find more interesting people, but I'm happy to come back.
Thanks so much. We
Okay.
really
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.